first quarter next year, when we come out with the definitive feasibility study that includes an expansion to 50,000 tonnes per annum, that really makes us then, or would make us, one of the top 4 producers globally. But not just a top 4 producer, also be the only one that's producing such a high purity product at scale with that ESG benefit.
Hello, welcome to Assay TV. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Steve Promnitz, who is the Managing Director and CEO of Lake Resources. Lake Resources are advancing their definitive feasibility study on their flagship Kachi Project in Argentina, where they are looking to use clean extraction technology to produce high purity lithium for batteries. Steve, great to see you today. If you could start things off, you've spoken on Assay TV a little over a year ago, so I think it'd be helpful if you can give our viewers just a quick snapshot of where you're at with the company.
Super, thank you very much. So what we've seen in the last year is a lot of changes in the broad lithium space. In the macro story, we've seen more electric vehicles, we've seen more incentives from governments in the European Union, the UK, the US, and we've also seen more battery plants being announced. But what we're not seeing is a significant increase in new lithium supply. And so there is going to be a squeeze going on, and we're seeing that reflected in pricing in lithium carbonate, lithium hydroxide, and also in the share prices of people in the lithium space. What do we do that's different? So we have one large project, our Kachi project in Argentina, and we have a series of others as well. We've got 4 projects, a large property package. And as you mentioned, we made a decision 3.5, 4 years ago to actually develop those projects using a new clean technology. And why did we do that? It's because the end users for all of these new batteries and these new cars going further, they need a very high purity product. Otherwise, it has to get reprocessed. And the other thing that electric vehicle makers are looking for, particularly out of the European Union, is a low carbon footprint and better ESG outcomes. And we're fortunate that because we took this move some years ago to move into direct lithium extraction, it both produces a very high purity product consistently that's scalable. And therefore, because you get a premium price, you get a healthy margin. And then separately, you get this major ESG benefit. We completed a pre-feasibility study last year, which was refreshed at the start of this year. We're well underway with the definitive feasibility study that we're aiming to have finished by Q1 of 2022, at the same time as our environmental social impact assessment. Then we aim to have financial close by the middle of next year, construction into production by first half 2024.
You mentioned sort of incentives coming from government, and I see you've recently announced that you've received a strong, what you've described as a strong expression of interest from the UK Export Finance, the UK's export credit agency. Can you tell us a little bit about what they've offered there?
Okay, so we're operating in Argentina, and it's not easy to source debt financing for lithium projects anyway. So we made a decision, once we demonstrated that our product works very well in batteries, we made a decision to use intermediaries to go and have discussions with export credit agencies around the world. The UK Export Finance came to us with a very fulsome expression of interest that includes support for the total financing of the project up to 70%. And that'll be a long-term debt, 8.5 years, after the finalizing of construction. And that's also lower priced. All of these export credit agencies provide lower price debt. There is the option that they could also direct lend to us, but normally what happens is they guarantee the funding and then you work with a panel of banks behind it. The great thing is, it is unusual when we haven't even finished our definitive feasibility study to have these sorts of expression of interest and that sort of support. And it's because all of these export credit agencies would like to be involved in this whole energy transition. And furthermore, because we can offer an ESG benefit, naturally that needs to be defined and detailed, but it shows a great voter support in both the project and what we're doing.
And what is it? What are the next steps into turning this expression of interest into a binding agreement?
So essentially, we have to do the things that we were going to do anyway, which is a definitive feasibility study. We aim for that first quarter next year. Our environmental social impact assessment. We continue and will finalize and announce at least one of our offtake agreements. And naturally, there's a level of due diligence. But long story short, it means that we can bring them and their panel of banks inside our tent. They can look at our studies now, and if there's anything they want to add to it, that can be added to it so that we're pretty much ready to go in the first half next year.
And as you mentioned, going with an ECA means that your cost of capital is likely to be lower. Yeah. How does it compare with sort of traditional bank lending?
Well, a traditional company in natural resources sector or energy, admittedly, we don't do any mining. All we do is process water. But even in the chemical industry, you're probably going to be looking at debt of around 15% interest rate plus, and probably 3 to 5 year term maximum. In this case, we get a longer duration debt. That cost of capital would be lower. It remains to be seen what that could be, but you could imagine interest rates somewhere around 3 or 5%. And so it makes the financials of the project even more robust. But moreover, it provides this quasi-government seal of approval to the project. And that's important when you're operating in a place like Argentina. That both bolsters and provides support for the EPCM contractors, for the off-takers. I have to say we were really encouraged. Now, that doesn't mean that we're only going to be working with the UK Export Finance Group. It's quite possible there'll be one and possibly two other export credit agencies working alongside them. And so then it just really shows that the project has legs, and it tells investors this is going to happen.
And you must see this as a vote of confidence for your extraction technology. I think that's provided by, was it Lilac Solutions out of the US? Can you tell us a little bit more about your sort of partnership with Lilac and also, I mean, their backers, which includes Bill Gates's Breakthrough Energy Fund?
Yeah, so what Lilac does is we've been working with them now for nearly 4 years on a process called ion exchange. Ion exchange is very well known in water treatment. It's been used for a good 70 years. Also quite well known in the materials processing sector. What Lilac did was adjust that technology to work for lithium. So basically how it works is that you have this brine, the salty water, sits underneath the salt lake. You pump that up, and dissolved in that brine is lithium to about 1% or a bit less. These beads then just extract the lithium out without doing anything else. You can then return the brine back to its source, which is a good environmental outcome, but it's also very efficient. So because you just take the lithium out, you actually end up with a high purity product. Because of that, they received the backing of the Bill Gates-led Breakthrough Energy Fund in February 2020. Also MIT's the Engine Fund, and we are in a partnership for the life of the project. They will be actually operating on site with us to provide those services.
And I guess it compares very favorably in terms of sort of the time of production with the traditional way that salars are exploited.
Yeah, so the traditional method is to pump that brine up, as I was saying, and put it into ponds. And those ponds then sit there in the sun 9 months, 18 months, 24 months. The water evaporates away, the salts concentrate, and then you need to separate out the lithium from all the other salts. Nothing wrong with that process. But in the last 5 years, we've seen battery technologies really accelerate and improve. And so their demands to get a consistent high quality product have also increased, and particularly on purity, they don't want to see any impurities to ensure there aren't any battery performance issues. That's been, I guess, one of the key differences. The next thing, as you mentioned, is we can come to market more quickly. Because the process is efficient, it's also modular. As we want to expand, we can just add more modules and drill a few more wells. So it's quite elegant in that process, and I think really suits. It's a 21st century solution for a 21st century demand.
The Export Credit Agency deal, though, requires sort of what they describe as a minimum UK content. What does that involve?
So each export credit agency, they're set up essentially around trade finance. So they want to be selling equipment and also services and supplies from that particular jurisdiction. So it will mean that there will be a minimum content level from the UK. If we had done it with one of the EU-based ones or or out of the US, there would be similar guidelines. And that will be something that we'll be discussing through the definitive feasibility study.
I mean, you mentioned in your announcement that there could be a chance to get more finance to expand production at Kachi. What sort of expansion are you thinking of?
If we go back 6 months ago, we were having discussions with off-takers, and they were keen to buy everything that we're producing. And we've seen that demand increase. So now the discussions are, all right, what would it take for you to double production to 50,000 tonnes per annum? So we were looking at doing a study alongside our DFS. We'll probably actually embed it in our definitive feasibility study now as a phase 2, because the demand is clearly there from off-takers, and we'd like to have at least 2. And now the indications are that debt financing would also be there for the expansion. So it's actually pretty exciting. And first quarter next year, when we come out with a definitive feasibility study that includes an expansion to 50,000 tonnes per annum, that really makes us then, or would make us, one of the top 4 producers globally. But not just a top 4 producer, also be the only one that's producing such a high purity product at scale with that ESG benefit.
You mentioned off-takers just now. Where are you at with discussions with off-takers, and also that all-important process of getting your lithium product tested and qualified by potential battery makers?
Yeah, so we're going to have a demonstration plant on site at the end of this calendar year, and as part of that, we'll be able to produce more larger samples. We're looking to produce around 2.5 tonnes of lithium carbonate by somewhere in the first half of next year, that we can then distribute to those off-takers so they do their qualification testing. We've only been able to send small samples, so that qualification testing will then continue. Off-take agreements would then be subject to that occurring, but we're quite confident that's going to occur. To be brutally honest, in the last 8 to 10 weeks, the field of potential off-take participants has expanded significantly. Electric vehicle makers are looking to get involved as well because of that ESG benefit. There's a supply squeeze coming on, and we're just trying to get the right commercial terms together with that tier 1 battery maker and car maker. So they're well underway. We've probably taken the foot off the pedal a little bit in the last few weeks. We've now got this news out about debt financing, so I think we can demonstrate to the off-takers this is a robust project and it's happening. They've got more confidence there.
Excellent. So what are the sort of key milestones we should be looking out for over the rest of the year?
Okay, so pretty much between now and the middle of next year, these are the things that are coming. You can probably and reasonably anticipate more news exactly about how we're working with our technology partner. Because we now have debt financiers involved, we need to produce a very fulsome document about the relationship between our 2 companies for the life of the project. You'll probably hear about at least one of those off-takers before the DFS comes out. You'll be able to hear about the demonstration plant on site come the end of this calendar year. The definitive feasibility study will come out the end of Q1 next year. The environmental social impact assessment pretty soon after. Probably during that time, there'll be an update about the debt financing and how that's progressing. And then by the middle of next year, that'll be pretty much a financial close, and then moving into construction for production in first half 2024. So it's a very busy time. We are increasing our team now in Argentina, as well as here in our head office. And the fact that we can do all this during COVID, it's actually it's quite inspirational that in this day and age we can do these sorts of things remotely.
Absolutely. Well, you've got a lot of activity ahead of you there. We hope you'll come back and tell us a little bit about it as things progress. But thank you very much for joining us today, Steve Promnitz of Lake Resources.
Yes, thank you very much. So we're ticket code LKE on the ASX and LLKKF on the OTC. Thanks so much. Cheers now.
Thanks.